She always thought the world centered around her until she pressed the button on her pepper spray. One man, one hat, and one word general turned her life upside down. And it all started with the morning coffee and her desperate need to prove she was right at any cost. Karen, 38 years old and the self-declared ruler of all things proper, pulled her oversized SUV into the coffee shop parking lot like she was taking territory. It was her usual Monday routine: soy latte, little retail therapy, and, of course, finding something or someone to get irritated about. As she stepped onto the patio with her latte in hand, she stopped, her eyes locked onto the man sitting at one of the tables. He looked to be about 60, casually sipping his coffee and flipping through a newspaper. But it was not the man that caught her attention. It was the bright red "Make America Great Again" cap on his head. For Karen, that hat was like waving a red flag in front of a bull. In her mind, it represented everything wrong with the world. And of course, Karen was not one to let such an insult slide. She marched past his table, her heels clicking like a countdown. Then, unable to contain herself, she spun around to face him. "Seriously? You got the audacity to wear that here?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt, loud enough to catch the attention of nearby customers. The man calmly folded his newspaper and looked up at her with a confused expression. "Excuse me, do I know you?" he asked, his tone respectful but firm. Karen's face flushed. "Oh, you do not need to know me to know you are a disgrace," she snapped. "People like you are the problem with this country." The man, whose name was Greg, simply raised an eyebrow. "It is just a hat, ma'am," he said, his voice steady. "Maybe take a second to think before you start judging strangers." That response hit Karen like a spark to dry kindling. Her voice rose as she pointed at him. "A hat. A hat. Do you even realize what that represents? People like you make me sick." Greg reclined back in his chair, completely unfazed. "Lady, I'm just trying to enjoy my coffee. Maybe you should try doing the same." The comment, said so casually, sent Karen into overdrive. "Ignore me. That is exactly what people like you do," she shouted, her arms flailing as if to make her point more serious. By now, the other patrons had stopped pretending they were not listening. Phones began discreetly recording as whispers spread across the patio. One brave soul muttered, "Maybe you should relax." But Karen shot back with bitterness, "I do not care what you think. I'm standing up for what is right." Greg sighed, clearly trying to avoid escalating the situation. He reached for his newspaper, but Karen was not about to let it go. "Oh, so now you are ignoring me?" "Typical," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Cowards like you always run from real conversations." The pressure on the patio was as thick as the foam on Karen's untouched latte. Eyes darted between her and Greg, waiting to see who would make the next move. One thing was certain: this was not going to end quietly. Karen stood there, her anger rising like a pot about to boil over her. Words were not hitting the way she wanted. They never seemed to. With people like him, Greg had the nerve to stay calm, to not rise to her bait, and it drove her to the edge. Then, as if an idea lit up in her mind, she reached into her oversized bag. From within, she pulled out her reliable pepper spray. It was a bright orange canister she carried just in case, though nobody could remember the last time she needed it. Today, however, she decided it was not just a safety, it was a statement. She took a step forward, raising the canister and aiming it directly at Greg. The entire patio seemed to hold its breath. "For everyone you have ever hurt," Karen shouted, her voice echoing across the space. Before anyone could react, she pressed the button. A sharp, stinging mist hit Greg square in the face. He let out a pained cry. Stumbling backward and dropping his coffee, his hands flew to his eyes as he tried to wipe away the sting, but it was no use. "What the?" Greg managed to choke out as he fell to one knee. The patio erupted into confusion. People jumped from their seats, some rushing to Greg's aid, others fumbling to record the scene with their phones. The air was thick with gasps, whispers, and the unmistakable sound of Karen's voice cutting through it all. "You all saw it," she yelled, spinning around boldly, as if she were addressing an audience. "He provoked me. I had no choice." One of the baristas sprinted out with a bottle of water, kneeling next to Greg. His face was bright red, tears streaming uncontrollably as he coughed and struggled to regain his bearings. "Lady, are you out of your mind?" someone called out from the crowd. He was literally just sitting there. Karen whipped around to face her critic, her voice dripping with outrage. "Oh, sure, defend the guy in that hat." Typical. The shock on the faces around her was palpable. Even those who did not know Greg were clearly not on Karen's side. Someone muttered "unreal," while another patron was already dialing for emergency services. But Karen, as confident as ever, pulled out her phone and dialed the police herself. "Yes, hello," she said into the receiver, her tone sharp and self-important. "I need officers here immediately. There is a dangerous man bothering me at the coffee shop on Main Street." The crowd collectively groaned. A woman near the back whispered, "Oh, come on." Minutes later, the sound of sirens cut through the tense silence. Two police cruisers pulled up and uniformed officers stepped onto the patio. One of them took one look at Greg, who was now sitting on the ground, still clutching a damp napkin to his face, and scowled. "What is going on here?" the officer asked, his gaze shifting between Karen and Greg. Karen did not miss a beat. She marched up to the officers, pointing an accusing finger at Greg. "That man," she declared, "tried to threaten me, so I defended myself." The officer's eyes narrowed as he turned back to Greg. The injured man was being helped to his feet by the barista, who was staring at Karen like she was the villain in a soap opera. Then one of the officers paused, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Wait a second," he said, stepping closer to Greg. "Is that General Williams?" Karen stared, the smug expression on her face fading for just a moment. "General, what are you talking about?" The officer ignored her, instead addressing Greg directly. "Sir, I did not recognize you at first. Are you okay?" Greg, still blinking rapidly and holding a napkin to his face, gave a small nod. "I will live," he whispered, "but this woman decided to attack me for no reason." Karen's jaw fell. "Excuse me, no reason." "You, ma'am," the second officer interrupted, his voice firm. "I think you need to justify yourself right now." Karen's confidence weakened, but only slightly. "Explain myself. He is the one causing trouble. Look at that hat. Do you know what it stands for?" The officer did not react. "I know exactly what that hat stands for, ma'am, but what I am more interested in is why you thought spraying a retired general of the United States Army with pepper spray was a good idea." Karen's face paled for the first time. Her eyes darted nervously around the patio where the crowd was now fully invested in watching her unravel. "You are joking, right?" she mumbled. "He is not. He cannot be." But the way the officers treated Greg said it all. The truth was out, and Karen's carefully crafted narrative was crumbling before her eyes. The word general hit Karen like a freight train. Her smug expression vanished, replaced by wide eyes and a face that seemed to drain of all color. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out except a weak stammer. Greg, meanwhile, was finally able to rinse his face. A barista had handed him a water bottle and a clean towel. His eyes were red and watery, but his calm was intact. Despite the stinging pain, he stood tall, his presence powerful even in the midst of the chaos. One of the officers stepped forward. "General Williams, are you all right, sir?" Greg gave a small nod, still holding the towel to his face. "Fine," he said, his voice firm, though a bit strained. Then, turning slightly toward Karen, he added, "But it seems I have been attacked for no reason." Karen's jaw dropped. "Attacked? No. She faltered over her words, trying to claw back control of the situation. "I did not know you were, someone important." Greg's intense gaze cut her off. "You did not know, and that is supposed to excuse your actions?" His voice was calm, but every word hit like a hammer. "Tell me, do you attack everyone wearing something you do not agree with? Or am I just special?" Karen shrank back, her bravado breaking under the weight of his words. I thought." Greg did not let her finish. "You thought nothing. That is the problem," he said, his tone sharp. "You acted out of pure stupidity, and now you are trying to justify it. That is not how this works." The patio was dead silent, except for the faint buzz of someone's phone still recording. One of the officers stepped toward Karen, his voice firm. "Ma'am, I am going to need to see some ID." Karen paused, glancing around the crowd as if someone might step in to save her, but the onlookers were either staring at her or staring at their phones, capturing every second of her downfall. She fumbled in her bag, pulling out her wallet. With shaking hands, the officer took her ID, glanced at it, and exchanged a look with his partner. "All right, ma'am," he said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You are under arrest for attack." The words hung in the air like a shock. Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. "What attack? No, no, you do not understand. He provoked me." Another voice from the crowd chimed in, sharp and sarcastic. "Yeah, by sitting there drinking coffee. Real dangerous." Chuckles rippled through the audience, followed by a scatter of applause as the officers gently guided Karen toward the police car. She tried to protest, but her words were drowned out by the sound of clapping and a few well-timed years. Greg, still standing with the help of a barista, watched the scene unfold. One of the officers turned to him. "Sir, we will take it from here. Would you like to press charges?" Greg thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No need. This has already gone far enough. Let her learn her lesson." By the time the police car pulled away, the crowd had mostly cleared, but the damage was already done. Within hours, videos of the incident flooded the internet. Karen's dramatic outburst, her pepper spray attack, and the reveal that her victim was a retired general. Every moment was analyzed, shared, and memed. Karen's world fell apart almost instantly. Her employer, seeing the viral footage, fired her by the something of a legend hero. In an interview with the local news, he was asked about the incident. His response was calm and thoughtful. Just like him. "We live in a time where people act before they think. It is risky, and it leads to disorder. If nothing else, I hope this reminds people to pause and reflect on their actions." His words became a message shared alongside the videos of the incident, while Karen's name became linked with overreaction. Greg's became a sign of dignity and restraint, and the coffee shop, it became the most popular spot in town, with people stopping by just to sit at General Williams' table. As for Karen, she learned the difficult way that sometimes the biggest fights are the ones you bring upon yourself.